Chapter 758, Efforts Will Ultimately Pay Off. In the evening, Klein, who had just returned from St. Samuel Cathedral, was just about to enter the dining hall on the second floor when he saw butler Walter walk over and say with a polite bow, "Sir, the matter you wish to be investigated has been completed." Klein didn't inquire further in front of the other servants, as he staidly nodded. "Let's talk in the study." Walter followed behind him and came all the way to the third floor. Richardson then opened the door and lit the gas wall lamp inside. Klein unhurriedly walked to his desk, sat down, and looked at the butler for the report. As Walter gestured Richardson to guard outside the door, he approached the desk and deliberated over his words. After the door closed again, he said, "Ma'am Wahana's husband is a cloth merchant. He had been cooperating with someone and had invested £1,000 into it, but the other party ran off with the goods. She has already sought the help of Member of Parliament Macht and Ma'am Rihanna to urge the police department to crack the case as quickly as possible. However, the police usually doesn't dare to guarantee that they can find the target for such cases." Klein picked up the black fountain pen on his desk and stroked it. To Ma'am Wahana's family, £1,000 isn't a small sum. Based on what he knew, an ordinary home tutor didn't earn more than £150 a year. If the employer provided boarding and lodging, the salary would be even lower. Although Wahana served high society and had many employers, her annual income capped out at about £400 to £500. Furthermore, a large amount of her expenses would be spent on her dressing, posture, and looks to prevent her employers from finding her unfitting as an etiquette teacher. Yes, her husband's income as a cloth merchant can only be considered average. To him, a £1,000 investment is a rather huge investment, Walter said by mincing his words. "It's a lot for me too." Klein sighed and smiled. "I just came to Backland, so I'm not very familiar with the police." Walter immediately replied, "Sir, back when I was under the service of Viscount Conrad, I knew a few members of a Backland High-Ranking Police Officer Association." Backland High-Ranking Police Officer Association? That would be the most important members at Civilhouse Yard. Even the chief superintendents who are in charge of an entire borough might not be qualified for induction. Civilhouse Yard referred to the Backland Police Department. It got its name from the street it was located at. As expected of a butler who served under a noble family. Klein sighed inwardly as he smiled with a shake of his head. "There's no need to do so for the time being. On this aspect, I'm sure Ma'am Wahana is able to seek the help of many people. Be it Member of Parliament Macht or others, all of them have the ability to make Civilhouse Yard place importance on the case." He paused and deliberately said in passing, "I've seen the lower rungs of society, and I know their methods of survival. At times, the police might not be as useful as gang members or bounty hunters. Walter, go to the police department to retrieve the corresponding details and head over to the famous bars in the Backland Bridge area and East Borough to commission a bounty mission. Regardless if they find the corresponding criminals or the batch of cloth, I'll be giving them £200 in return." Ha ha, let's hope that those cheats had chosen to remain in Backland. A reward of £200. Walter repeated the sum as he couldn't help but steal a glance at his employer, as though he found it unbelievable that he would offer so much for Wahana's matter. He turned agape and was just about to say something but ultimately kept silent. All he did was seriously reply, "All right, sir. I'll give you this money directly." Klein slowly got up and took out his wallet. As Walter received the thick wad of cash, he asked in thought, "Should I tell Ma'am Wahana?" Klein smiled. "There's no need." Enlightened, Walter nodded with a bow. "Your generosity will spread through this street." East Borough, Derivy Street, in a cramped but lively pub. Zio, who had seriously combed her short, blonde hair before heading out, squeezed through the area filled with men that stank of alcohol and putrid sweat and arrived at the bar counter. She tapped the counter and asked the bartender, "Any new missions today?" If it were anyone else who asked without ordering any drinks, the bartender would have ignored them, but upon recognizing Zio, a bounty hunter who no one wanted drinking, he could only sigh and say, "A very handsome reward, £200. £200. Zio nearly suspected that she had heard wrong. Apart from Miss Audrey's missions, she had never seen such a handsome reward in East Borough or the Backland Bridge area. Even the mission to seek out Isaac Eggers that drove bounty hunters crazy had only offered £150. For an ordinary bounty hunter, completing a commission like this was enough for them to not work for a year. To Zio, it was equally important because she had been helping the mysterious man in the golden mask over the past few months. She had learned that the man was from MI9, and she was trying to earn enough contributions to exchange for the interrogator potion formula. Therefore, the reward she received when completing his tasks only paid a little. Most of it was exchanged towards her contribution goals, so all her savings came from the advantages that her sheriff sequence had given her to capture criminals. Once I receive the potion formula, I still have to spend money to buy the Beyonder ingredients, and I only have 300-odd pounds. Fours is right. Money isn't omnipotent, but it's sufficiently important. Upon having this thought, she looked at the bartender and asked cautiously, "What's the mission? Who commissioned it?" "Find a few cheats. They cheated the victim of cloth costing £1,000. As the bartender handed the details to Zio, he said, "The person who commissioned the mission looked like a butler. He called himself Walter, and he's in service of a Mr. Dwayne Dance from Berkland Street. If you capture the cheats or find the cloth, you can head there to retrieve the bounty." Zio quickly flipped through the documents as something quickly formulated in her mind. She instinctively knew the direction in which to continue the investigations. "I'll take this mission," she said immediately with a nod. The bartender shrugged and said, "You aren't the only one. All the bounty hunters have taken on this mission. Besides, they have other ideas." "Like what?" Zio asked out of curiosity. The bartender chuckled. "They say that since Mr. Dwayne Dance is so generous, they're willing to recommend themselves if he lacks a bodyguard. However, they later gave up on the idea since being a bodyguard isn't as free as being a bounty hunter. Even having drinks will have to wait until they're given time off. That's not a problem for me, but I can only be a bounty hunter." Zio nodded, jumped off the high stool in front of the bar counter, and didn't waste time heading for the door. The next day, just as Klein finished breakfast and was preparing to head to his garden to have a stroll to aid in his digestion, butler Walter came in from outside and silently followed behind him until there wasn't anyone around. "Sir, there are 2 matters that need your attention," he said politely. "2 matters?" Klein was somewhat surprised. He thought that there would only be one. Walter nodded. "Yes, the first matter involves the 10% shares in the Backland Bike Company. Someone has already offered £10,000. Sir, do you still wish to continue in the bid?" "It has been raised to £10,000. Not bad at all." Klein deliberately acted stumped as he thought. "I'm new in Backland, and there are many things that need me to hold back on." "Let's leave it at that." "All right, sir," Walter then said. "The cheats who scammed Ma'am Wahana's husband of the cloth have been captured. The bounty hunter has already arrived and requested payment." That quickly, Klein turned his head in shock as he looked at his butler. If he had taken action himself, he was indeed capable of settling it that very day. After, he had dowsing rod seeking to find people, but the problem stemmed from the fact that most bounty hunters weren't seers. Yes, perhaps it's a Beyonder good at tracking and searching for people. Klein made a preliminary judgment. Walter answered in confirmation, "Yes, it's much faster than I imagined." According to that bounty hunter, she did a reverse search from black market sales before finding the cheats. The black market peddlers gave in so easily. From the looks of it, they must have been taught a lesson with the fist. Klein nodded and said, "What's that bounty hunter's name? She's quite capable." "She calls herself Zio," Walter answered truthfully. "No way." Klein almost stumbled. Thankfully, he had the impressive balance of a clown. After calming the upheavals through his heart while acting calm, he deliberated and said, "Keep the bounty hunter's contact method. Perhaps there might be a chance to gain her assistance in the future." "All right, sir." Walter didn't find any problems with Dwayne Dance's instructions. Any decent member of high society kept some unofficial means to their chests. Klein didn't continue on the topic of Zio as he tersely said, "How much was reclaimed?" The cash and the yet-to-be-sold cloth from the cheats came up to about £850. Walter had apparently anticipated his employer's inquiry on the matter and had asked ahead of time. "Very good," Klein nodded and said. "After paying the bounty hunter, help her send the cheats and the goods to the nearby police station." Northborough Police Station. Wahana and her husband, Bacchus, looked at the high-ranking inspector in front of them as they asked in unison, surprise coloring their voices. "It's been found. They've been caught." The high-ranking police inspector smiled in response. "Yes." When he informed them how much cash and cloth was left, Wahana and Bacchus heaved a collective sigh of relief. They could afford £150 in losses. Furthermore, the remaining cloth still had space for greater appreciation and profit. In essence, they hadn't suffered much of a loss. They repeatedly thanked the inspector until someone invited Bacchus to identify the goods and criminals. Wahana sat there without losing her etiquette. She smiled at the high-ranking inspector and said, "Your efficiency has exceeded my expectations. I'm very curious as to how you found the bunch of cheats." Being aware that this beautiful and elegant lady knew a member of Parliament of the House of Commons, and that she would eventually learn the truth, the high-ranking inspector didn't hide it from her. In fact, it was completed by a bounty hunter. She investigated the black market of stolen goods and quickly caught the suspects. "You even offered a bounty." Wahana seemed to gain a full understanding of the whole story. The inspector shook his head and said, "No, someone beat us to it. He offered £200. £200? Wahana asked in surprise. That wasn't a small sum of money, and it even exceeded the expected profit that her husband would earn from the sale. Seeing the inspector give an affirmative reply, Wahana couldn't help but ask, "Who was it that offered the bounty?" The bounty hunter didn't say, but accompanying her was a gentleman dressed as a butler. The inspector simply described Walter's looks. Wahana vaguely guessed at the butler's identity as she leaned back slightly, muttering softly to herself, £200. In the afternoon, Wahana, who came to Member of Parliament Mac's house to teach his daughter etiquette, first thanked Ma'am Rihanna for extending their help. After the blackish-green-haired Rihanna said a few words of humility, she asked, "Wahana, I heard that you're Mr. Dwayne Dance's etiquette teacher. I wonder what kind of person he is." Wahana deliberated and said, "He's a true gentleman. He's warm-hearted, generous, kind, educated, gentlemanly, and very knowledgeable." Rihanna nodded slightly upon hearing that, before turning to look at her proud daughter, and chuckled. "Unfortunately, he's a little too old, or he might make a good match." "Well, I plan on inviting him to our ball this weekend."